She was 8 months pregnant when her husband pulled over on a frozen highway. Christmas Eve, negative 15 degrees, a blizzard so fierce you couldn't see your own hand in front of your face. And he told her to get out. Not because the car broke down, not because of an emergency, but because his mistress was pregnant too, and he had made his choice. What Derek Mitchell didn't expect? His wife would survive. What he never imagined. A billionaire widower would open his door to find her frozen on his doorstep. And what he certainly never planned for, the war that would follow, the enemies who would rise against her, the moment she would lose everything a second time, and the fire that would burn inside her until justice was finally served. This is the story of Caroline Mitchell, a woman who walked through hell not once, but 3 times and came out the other side holding fire. Stay with me until the end, because this ending, you will never see it coming. Pull over. Derek's voice sliced through the howling wind like a blade cutting through silk. The windshield wipers scraped back and forth in a desperate rhythm. Back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the relentless snow. Carolyn gripped the door handle until her knuckles turned white. Her back ached from sitting too long. 8 months pregnant, and every bump in the road sent jolts of discomfort through her swollen body. The baby shifted inside her, restless and uncomfortable, as if sensing the tension that filled the car like poison gas. "What did you say?" Carolyn asked, certain she had misheard him. The heater blasted warm air, but it could not touch the cold spreading through her chest. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong for months, maybe years. She had felt it in the growing distance between them, in the late nights at the office that stretched into early mornings, in the way Derek looked at his phone instead of her face when she spoke. "I said pull over." Derek's jaw was set like concrete. His eyes never left the road ahead. "Right now, Caroline, I mean it." The SUV slowed gradually. Tires crunched against ice and gravel as Derek steered toward the shoulder of the empty highway. Vermont Route 7 stretched in both directions, swallowed by whiteness. Nothing but snow, nothing but cold, nothing but the Christmas music playing mockingly on the radio. Silent night, holy night. All is calm, all is bright. Carolyn watched her husband's profile in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. The face she had loved for 6 years. The face she had memorized in 1,000 tender moments. Now it looked like a stranger's face, hard and cold and empty of anything resembling love. "Is something wrong with the car?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Did you hear a strange noise? I didn't notice anything." Derek put the SUV in park. The engine idled, humming beneath them like a mechanical heartbeat. Heat continued to blast from the vents, but Carolyn felt suddenly, inexplicably cold. A chill that had nothing to do with the blizzard raging outside. "Get out," Derek said. Carolyn laughed, a nervous, uncertain sound that echoed in the silence between Christmas carols. "Very funny, Derek. You almost had me for a second there. Now seriously, what's going on? Why did we stop?" "I'm not joking." His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reading from a script he had rehearsed 1,000 times. "Get out of the car, Carolyn." His phone buzzed on the center console. He had been texting someone for the past hour. Quick glances down at the glowing screen. Tiny smiles she was not supposed to see. Fingers moving rapidly over the keyboard whenever he thought she was looking out the window. "Derek, it's negative 15 degrees outside." Carolyn placed both hands protectively over her swollen belly. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting the very idea. "We're in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town is probably 20 miles away. And I'm 8 months pregnant. This isn't funny anymore." "I told you I'm not joking." Derek finally turned to look at her. His blue eyes, the ones she had fallen in love with at a charity gala 6 years ago, were completely empty. No warmth, no guilt, no humanity. "Vanessa's pregnant too. She's due in March, just a few weeks after you. And I've made my choice." The words hung in the air between them. Carolyn heard them, but her brain refused to process their meaning. Vanessa. The name was familiar. Too familiar. Derek's executive assistant. 28 years old. Blonde hair that always looked professionally styled. Perfect smile that showed exactly the right amount of teeth. The woman who had been at every company event, standing just a little too close to Caroline's husband. "What are you talking about?" Caroline's voice came out as barely a whisper. Vanessa? Your assistant? Vanessa? Yes, Vanessa. Derek said the name like a caress, like a prayer. I've been seeing her for 3 years. She understands me in ways you never could. She supports my ambitions instead of holding me back. And now she's carrying my child. The child I actually want. 3 years. The number echoed in Caroline's mind like a death toll. 3 years of lies. 3 years of betrayal. 3 years of sleeping next to a man who was dreaming of someone else. But I'm carrying your child too. Carolyn heard her own voice breaking apart at the seams. Our daughter, the baby we tried so hard to conceive, all those fertility treatments, all those disappointments, and now finally, that baby was a mistake. Derek cut her off without a shred of remorse, an accident that never should have happened. I thought I had taken care of things. Apparently, I wasn't careful enough. Taken care of things. The phrase hit Caroline like a physical blow. What did that mean? What had he done? She looked at her husband, really looked, and tried to understand how she had missed this. How had she not seen the monster beneath the charming exterior? The truth was, Derek Mitchell had learned to hide his true nature from a very young age. Growing up as the only son of Edward Mitchell, he had been taught that weakness was unacceptable. Emotions were liabilities. Other people existed only to be used, manipulated, controlled. His mother Marguerite had doted on him obsessively while simultaneously criticizing everything he did. His father had praised him only for victories and punished him mercilessly for any failure. By the time Derek was 18, he had learned that love was transactional, that relationships were strategic, that the best way to get what you wanted was to make people believe you cared about them, use them until they were no longer useful, and then discard them without a second thought. Caroline had been his most successful project yet. Beautiful, educated, kind. The perfect accessory for a rising corporate executive. The perfect cover for a man who felt nothing. But she had also been the first person to make him feel something close to genuine emotion. In the early days of their relationship, before he had fully committed to using her, he had sometimes wondered what it would be like to actually love someone, to let down his guard, to be real. He had pushed those thoughts away. They were dangerous. They made him weak, and Derek Mitchell could never afford to be weak. So he had hardened himself, committed fully to the deception, built his life on lies and manipulation and the cold certainty that everyone was disposable. Even his wife, even his unborn child. I don't understand. Tears were streaming down her cheeks now, hot against her cold skin. Derek, please. Whatever I did wrong, I'm sorry. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through whatever problems. There's nothing to fix. Derek reached across her body and unlatched her seatbelt. The click sounded impossibly loud in the confined space. Our marriage was a business arrangement from the start. My father needed me to appear stable and family-oriented for the Henderson merger. You were convenient, pretty enough, agreeable enough, desperate enough to believe it was real. His hands were rough as he pushed her toward the passenger door, impatient fingers prying her grip loose from the dashboard. Derek, please. Carolyn was sobbing now, ugly, desperate shades that shook her entire body. You can't do this. I'll die out there. Our baby will die. That's not really my problem anymore. He shoved her harder. The door swung open and cold air rushed in like a living thing. Snowflakes swirled around her face, stinging her eyes, filling her lungs with ice. Start walking. Maybe someone will come along and pick you up. Maybe not. Either way, I don't care. Carolyn tumbled out of the SUV. Her knees hit the frozen ground with a sickening crack. Pain shot through her legs, through her hips, radiating up her spine. Snow soaked through her thin maternity coat immediately, the cold biting into her skin like 1,000 tiny teeth. She scrambled to her feet, slipping twice on the ice, pounded on the passenger window with both fists. Wait, my phone, my wallet. Derek, please, I have nothing. Through the snow-streaked glass, she could see him checking his reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting his collar, running fingers through his perfectly styled hair, as if he was preparing for a date rather than leaving his pregnant wife to die. The SUV pulled away. The engine revved as Derek accelerated back onto the highway. Taillights glowed red through the swirling snow, two demonic eyes watching her with cold indifference. Then they disappeared, swallowed by the white void. Caroline stood there in the middle of the frozen highway. The wind screamed around her, tearing at her inadequate clothing, stealing the warmth from her body 1 degree at a time. Snow pelted her face like tiny frozen fists. Her breath came out in white puffs that vanished the moment they left her lips. This cannot be happening. She repeated the words in her head, over and over and over, like a prayer, like a spell that might somehow undo the last 10 minutes of her life. He wouldn't do this. He didn't do this. Any second now, those taillights would reappear. He would come back. This was a test, a cruel joke, a nightmare she would wake from at any moment. The road stretched empty in both directions. The only sound was the howling wind and her own ragged breathing. He's not coming back. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her legs buckled. She fell to her knees in the snow, wrapped her arms around her pregnant belly, as if she could somehow shield her unborn daughter from the cold that was already seeping into her bones. How long could a person survive in these conditions? The question surfaced from somewhere in her memory, her nursing school training, before Derek convinced her to quit, before he told her that his wife did not need to work, before she gave up everything she was to become everything he wanted. Frostbite begins within minutes at these temperatures. Hypothermia sets in quickly after that. Core body temperature drops. Confusion, drowsiness, unconsciousness, death. She might have 30 minutes, maybe less, with the wind chill. Her teeth chattered so violently her jaw ached. The baby had gone still inside her. Too cold, too stressed, no longer kicking in protest. Please be okay. Please, please be okay. Carolyn forced herself to stand. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else, wooden, unresponsive. But she made them move anyway, one foot in front of the other. That was all she had to do. Just keep moving, find shelter, find help, survive. The road curved ahead, disappearing into a wall of white. She had no idea which direction led to civilization. No idea how far she might have to walk. No idea if she would make it at all. But she had to try. For her daughter's sake, she had to try. Caroline walked. One step, then another, then another. The snow was already ankle deep and getting deeper by the minute. Her ballet flats were completely useless, soaked through within seconds. She could not feel her toes anymore, could barely feel her feet. The wind tore at her coat, finding every gap, every seam, every vulnerability. Her fingers had gone numb inside the thin gloves she had foolishly worn. Fashion over function, always trying to look perfect for Derek, always trying to be what he wanted. And look where that had gotten her. She had been walking for what felt like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes when she saw it. A flicker through the trees, a warm glow cutting through the relentless white. Lights, actual lights, a building of some kind. Caroline pushed forward with renewed desperation. Her legs burned, her lungs screamed with every frozen breath. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision, but she kept moving, toward the lights, toward hope. The trees opened up and she saw it clearly for the first time. A massive stone estate perched on a gentle hill. 3 stories of gray stone and dark timber, windows glowing golden against the storm. A long driveway lined with snow-covered hedges. A wreath on the front door, icicle lights hanging from the eaves. It looked like something from a Christmas card, or a dream, or the kind of hallucination that came right before you froze to death. Please be real. Please be real. Please be real. The driveway seemed endless, each step harder than the last. Her body was shutting down. She could feel it happening in slow motion, the strange warmth spreading through her limbs that she knew meant hypothermia was winning, the drowsiness tugging at the edges of her consciousness. Just a few more steps, just a few more. The front door loomed before her, massive oak with iron fixtures, a brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. She reached for it with hands that would not cooperate. Her fingers refused to close around the cold metal. Carolyn collapsed on the doorstep, the cold stone pressed against her cheek, rough and hard and somehow comforting. Snow dusted her eyelashes, her lips, her hair. Above her, the sky was dark and angry, churning with more snow to come. So this is how I die. The thought was strangely peaceful. She had tried. She had fought. She had walked through a blizzard with her daughter inside her. That had to count for something. Her eyes drifted closed. The cold was receding now, replaced by a false warmth that wrapped around her like a blanket. This was the end, she knew. The body's final trick before shutting down completely. "I'm sorry, baby girl," Mommy tried. The last thing she heard before the darkness claimed her was the creak of the door opening above her, and a man's voice filled with shock and something that sounded almost like hope cutting through the howling wind. "My God, what happened to you? Margaret! Margaret! Call Dr. Brennan, now!" Strong arms lifted her from the cold stone. Warmth surrounded her, a heartbeat that was not her own pulsed against her cheek. And then there was nothing but darkness. Warmth was the first thing Caroline felt when awareness began to return. Not the false warmth of hypothermia. Real warmth. The kind that seeped into frozen bones and reminded them what it meant to be alive. The kind that came from roaring fires and thick blankets in the presence of other human beings. She tried to open her eyes, but her lashes were stuck together, frozen solid and matted with melted snow. Someone was rubbing her hands between theirs. Large hands, strong hands, gentle despite their size. "That's it. Come back to us. You're doing wonderfully. Just keep fighting." A man's voice, deep and cultured, with the faintest trace of an accent she could not place. Boston, maybe, or somewhere in Europe. Not Derek's voice. This voice was kind, concerned. The voice of someone who actually cared whether she lived or died. Caroline forced her eyes open through sheer willpower. The world swam into focus slowly, like a photograph developing in chemicals. A ceiling with dark wooden beams crossing in geometric patterns. A chandelier that dripped with crystals, catching and throwing light in 1,000 directions. Firelight dancing on walls covered in silk wallpaper. "There you are." The man leaned into her field of vision. He was older than Derek, mid-40s perhaps. Salt and pepper hair swept back from a high forehead, dark eyes set deep beneath heavy brows. A face that might have been handsome once before grief carved lines around his mouth and shadows under his eyes. Handsome still, in a weathered sort of way, like a house that had survived too many storms. "Where am I?" Carolyn's voice emerged as a croak. Her throat felt like she had swallowed sandpaper. "You're safe, that's what matters." The man tucked the blanket tighter around her shoulders with surprising tenderness. "My name is Jonathan Ashford. You collapsed on my doorstep about 25 minutes ago. My housekeeper is making you something warm to drink while we wait for the doctor." Caroline tried to sit up. The room spun violently, colors and shapes blurring together into a nauseating kaleidoscope. She fell back against the cushions with a groan. "Easy now. You nearly died out there. Hypothermia was setting in. Another few minutes and your core temperature would have dropped below the point of recovery." Jonathan's voice was calm, but his eyes told a different story. He had been afraid for her. This stranger had actually been afraid she might die on his doorstep. "The baby seems fine. Strong heartbeat, according to Margaret. She used to work as a nurse before she came to work for my family." "The baby." Carolyn's hands flew to her stomach, suddenly terrified. Her belly was still round beneath the layers of blankets. Still warm, still there, but so quiet. Why wasn't the baby moving? "Here." Jonathan pressed something cool against her palm, a stethoscope. "Listen for yourself. Margaret checked twice already, but I thought you might want to hear it." Caroline placed the stethoscope against her belly with trembling hands. Jonathan helped her position it correctly, his fingers brushing against hers with clinical detachment. She pressed the earpieces into place and listened. Thump, 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 thump. Her daughter's heartbeat, fast and strong and beautifully alive. "She's okay." Carolyn choked on the words as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Oh God, she's okay." "She's a fighter." Jonathan's voice softened slightly. "Like her mother, apparently." An older woman appeared in the doorway, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wire-rimmed glasses perched on a nose that had clearly been broken at some point and healed slightly crooked. She carried a tray with a steaming mug and a thick wool blanket draped over her arm. "The tea is ready, Mr. Ashford." She bustled into the room with the efficient movements of someone who had spent decades taking care of others. Chamomile with honey and a splash of brandy for medicinal purposes. "And I've got the blue guest room warming up for when she's ready to move." Thank you, Margaret. Jonathan rose from his position beside the sofa. He was taller than Caroline had realized, over 6 feet, with a lean build of someone who had once been athletic, but had let physical fitness slide in favor of other concerns. Margaret helped Caroline sit up slowly, propping pillows behind her back until she was comfortable. The room still swayed slightly, but the violent spinning had stopped. Details began to emerge from the blur. The study was enormous by any standard. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, stuffed with leather-bound volumes that look older than the country itself. A massive fireplace dominated the fourth wall, flames crackling orange and gold, and casting dancing shadows across an oriental rug that probably cost more than Caroline's entire wardrobe. Everything spoke of money, old money, the kind that built estates in the Vermont mountains and filled them with priceless art and generations of history. Drink this, dear. Margaret pressed the warm mug into Caroline's hands. Small sips. Your body temperature is still recovering. We don't want to shock your system. Caroline wrapped her fingers around the mug, savoring the warmth that seeped into her thawing skin. She brought it to her lips and sipped carefully. The chamomile was sweet and soothing, the honey coating her raw throat, the brandy spreading heat through her chest. Thank you. Her voice was steadier now, almost human. Both of you, I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't found this place. You would have died. Jonathan stated it as simple fact, without drama or embellishment. The hypothermia was already affecting your cognitive function when I found you. You were barely conscious. Another 15 minutes in that cold and your heart would have stopped. Carolyn shuddered at the matter-of-fact assessment of her near-death experience. She had known she was in danger, had felt her body shutting down, but hearing it stated so plainly made it terrifyingly real. We called Dr. Patricia Brennan, Margaret added, settling onto the arm of a nearby chair. She lives about 2 miles down the mountain. Wonderful woman. Delivered half the babies in this county. She's trying to get here, but the roads are treacherous. The storm is getting worse, not better. I need to call someone. Carolyn suddenly remembered her complete vulnerability. My phone. I don't have my phone or my wallet or anything. The landline still works. Jonathan gestured toward an antique telephone on the desk. Cell towers are down because of the storm, but hardwired connections are still functioning. You're welcome to call anyone you need. Caroline tried to think of who to call. Her parents were gone, both of them, lost to illness, years before Derek entered her life. Her brother had moved to Australia and barely kept in touch. Her friends had drifted away during her marriage, one by one, as Derek isolated her from everyone who might have told her the truth. There was only Rachel, her college roommate, her best friend, the one person who had refused to give up on her no matter how many canceled lunches and unreturned phone calls accumulated between them. First, you need to tell us what happened. Jonathan's voice was gentle but firm. How did you end up on my doorstep in the middle of a Christmas Eve blizzard? 8 months pregnant and dressed like you were going to a holiday party. Not a polar expedition. Carolyn looked down at herself. The thin maternity dress she had worn to please Derek, the inadequate coat that was more fashion than function, the ruined ballet flats that had offered no protection against the snow. She must look ridiculous. A cautionary tale about vanity in the face of nature's fury. My husband. The word tasted like ash on her tongue. We were driving to his parents' house for Christmas. We do it every year, 2 hours from Boston to their estate in Stowe. She paused, took another sip of tea, gathered the strength to continue. He pulled over, on the highway, in the middle of the storm. Her voice began to shake. He told me to get out. Said his girlfriend was pregnant. Said he was choosing her instead. The silence that followed was deafening. The fire crackled. The wind howled outside. Somewhere a clock ticked steadily, marking seconds that felt like hours. He left you. Jonathan's voice had gone flat, dangerous, cold in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. Your husband left you, on a highway, in a blizzard, 8 months pregnant with his child. Yes, Carolyn could not meet his eyes. The shame was overwhelming, though she knew logically that she had done nothing wrong. This was Derek's cruelty, not her failure, but shame did not operate on logic. That's attempted murder. Jonathan's words were clipped, precise. the voice of a man accustomed to dealing with lawyers and contracts and consequences. At minimum, criminally negligent homicide if you had died, which you very nearly did. I know. The tears came then. Carolyn had been holding them back since she woke up, but now they poured down her cheeks in hot streams. I know what it was. I know what he did. I just can't believe. Her voice broke completely. 6 years of marriage dissolving in a single horrible moment on a frozen highway. Everything she thought she knew about her life revealed as a carefully constructed lie. Margaret was beside her in an instant, strong arms wrapped around her shoulders, pulling her close against a cardigan that smelled of lavender and vanilla and safety. Oh, honey. Margaret's voice cracked with shared emotion. Oh, you poor thing. What kind of monster does something like that? What kind of creature leaves a pregnant woman to freeze to death on Christmas Eve? Carolyn sobbed into the older woman's shoulder. Great heaving sobs that shook her entire body and seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her soul. She cried for the husband she thought she loved, for the marriage she thought was real, for the future that had shattered like ice on concrete. I'm sorry, she managed the words between sobs. I'm so sorry, you don't even know me. You don't owe me anything. And here I am falling apart in your house on Christmas Eve. You have nothing to apologize for. Jonathan had moved to stand by the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel near a photograph rack in a silver frame. A woman with dark hair and laughing eyes looked out from the picture. Beautiful, full of life, full of a joy that seemed impossible in this moment of pain. What that man did was monstrous, Jonathan continued, his eyes still fixed on the photograph. You're not falling apart. You're surviving. There's a significant difference. Carolyn lifted her head from Margaret's shoulder, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, looked at this stranger who had saved her life and was now offering her something she had not experienced in years, understanding without judgment, compassion without pity. Why are you being so kind to me? She asked. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment. His gaze drifted from the photograph on the mantel to the window where snow continued to fall in endless sheets of white. His reflection stared back at him, ghost-like and hollow, because my wife would have expected nothing less. His voice was barely above a whisper. Elizabeth collected strays, that's what she called them. People who needed help, animals who needed rescue, causes that needed champions. She would have carried you inside herself if she were still here. She would have fought for you. Would have. We're still here. Past tense. Carolyn understood then. The photograph, the sadness in his eyes, the emptiness that hung over this beautiful house like a shroud. I'm sorry for your loss, she said. Jonathan nodded once, brief, controlled, the acknowledgement of a man who had heard those words too many times and still had no idea what to do with them. Margaret, please prepare the blue guest room. Our guests will be staying until the storm passes. He paused, checked the weather app on his phone, and frowned, which according to the latest forecast will be at least 48 hours. Possibly longer if this system stalls like they're predicting. 48 hours? Carolyn's heart sank. I can't impose on you for that long. There must be somewhere else I can join, a hotel or a shelter, or the roads are completely impassable. Even if we wanted to move you, which I don't recommend in your condition, there's nowhere to go. Jonathan's expression softened slightly, the hard edges of his face relaxing by millimeters. Please stay. Rest. Let Margaret fuss over you, which she will regardless of what either of us says, and let Dr. Brennan examine you properly when she arrives. There was no room for argument in his tone, and truthfully, Caroline had no energy left to argue. Her body ached, her heart was shattered, and her baby needed warmth and safety, not a mother foolish enough to venture back into a storm that had nearly killed them both. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. You can repay me by surviving. Jonathan's eyes met hers, dark and intense and filled with something she could not name. That's all I ask, survive. For yourself, for your daughter. Prove that monster wrong about everything. He turned and left the room. His footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors, growing fainter until they disappeared entirely. Margaret helped Caroline to her feet. Her legs were unsteady but functional. The feeling had returned to her toes, though they throbbed with the particular pain of thawing flesh. Don't mind Mr. Ashford, Margaret said quietly as she guided Caroline toward the grand staircase. He doesn't mean to seem cold. He's just broken. Has been since Mrs. Elizabeth passed 3 years ago. Cancer. She fought it hard, but in the end, she shook her head sadly. He hasn't been the same since. None of us have. They climbed the stairs slowly. Caroline's hand trailed along a banister polished by generations of touches. Family portraits lined the walls. Men in military uniforms, women in elegant gowns, children with dogs and horses, and the confident expressions of those born to privilege. How long have you worked here? Caroline asked. 35 years come February. Margaret smiled at the memory. I started when I was barely older than you, came to help with a dinner party and never left. The Ashfords became my family, watched Jonathan grow from a boy to a man, stood beside him at his wedding, held his hand at his wife's funeral. She paused outside a door painted a soft shade of blue. This house used to be so full of life, Margaret continued, her voice dropping to something close to mourning. Parties every weekend, friends stopping by at all hours, Elizabeth's laughter echoing through the halls. Now it's a mausoleum with central heating. Jonathan works. He attends board meetings by video. He walks the grounds. He eats the meals I prepare. But he doesn't live, not really. She pushed open the door, revealing the blue guest room in all its understated elegance. Delicate wallpaper with white flowers climbing toward the ceiling. A four-poster bed piled high with quilts and pillows. A window seat overlooking gardens that were probably magnificent when not buried under 3 feet of snow. The bathroom is through that door, Margaret pointed. I'll bring up some of Mrs. Elizabeth's clothes. You're about the same size. Well, before the pregnancy anyway. I'll find something comfortable that will fit. She smiled gently, a grandmother's smile full of warmth and patience and the kind of unconditional acceptance Carolyn had not experienced in years. Try to rest, dear. De Brennan will be here as soon as she can manage. And in the morning, things will look better. They always do. That's what Elizabeth used to say. No matter how dark the night, morning always comes. She left. The door clicked shut softly behind her. Carolyn stood in the middle of the beautiful room, surrounded by luxury she had not earned and kindness she did not deserve. Alone, in a stranger's house, during a Christmas Eve blizzard, abandoned by her husband, 8 months pregnant with a baby girl who had nearly died before taking her first breath. She walked to the window, pressed her hand against the cold glass. Outside, the snow fell in endless curtains of white. The world was muffled and still and frozen solid. She needed to say the words out loud, needed to hear them in her own voice, needed to make them real. I'm not crazy. The words fogged the glass in front of her lips. He actually did this. Derek actually left me to die. He looked me in the eye and drove away. And he didn't care. He didn't care at all. The baby kicked in response, strong and sudden and almost defiant. Caroline placed both hands on her belly, drew a shaky breath that rattled in her lungs. Okay, baby girl, it's just you and me now. Daddy's gone. The life we thought we were going to have is gone, but we're alive. We're safe, and somehow we're going to survive this. I don't know how yet, but I promise you, we will. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if in agreement. Carolyn allowed herself a small smile, the first since everything fell apart. Maybe they would be okay after all. Maybe. The knock came at exactly 7:15 in the morning. Caroline knew the precise time because she had been staring at the antique clock on the mantel for hours. Sleep had proven impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Derek's face, heard his voice, felt the cold stone of the doorstep pressing against her cheek. So instead, she had watched the hours crawl by. 1 in the morning, 2, 3. The darkness outside her window absolute, except for the endless white of falling snow. Come in, she called, her voice rough from disuse. The door opened and a woman entered. Early 50s, short gray hair cut in a practical style that suggested she had no patience for fussing with appearance. A face that was handsome rather than pretty, with strong bones and intelligent brown eyes. She carried a leather medical bag that looked like it had seen decades of service, battered and scratched but obviously well-maintained. I'm Dr. Patricia Brennan. She set the bag on the nightstand with a decisive thump. I drove my snowmobile 2 miles through what can only be described as the apocalypse to get here, so I hope you appreciate the effort. Despite everything, Carolyn felt the ghost of a smile tugging at her lips. I appreciate it more than you know. Good. DeBrennan pulled out a stethoscope that was clearly her most prized possession, worn smooth from thousands of examinations. Now let's check on this baby of yours. Margaret tells me you had quite an adventure last night. That's one word for it. The examination was thorough and methodical. Blood pressure measured twice to ensure accuracy. Pulse counted for a full minute rather than the abbreviated checks Caroline remembered from her prenatal appointments in Boston. Temperature, normal now despite last night's close call. And the baby's heartbeat, searched for with patient determination until Dr. Brennan found the perfect position and held the stethoscope there for what felt like an eternity. How far along did you say you were? 32 weeks. Well, 32 weeks and 3 days technically. And you were outside in negative 15 degrees for approximately how long? 40 minutes, maybe closer to an hour. I lost track of time out there. Dr. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. She moved the stethoscope slightly, pressed harder against Caroline's belly, and listened with an intensity that made Caroline's anxiety spike. What is it? Caroline's voice trembled despite her efforts to remain calm. Is something wrong? Is the baby okay? The heartbeat is irregular. Dr. Brennan's expression was serious, but not panicked. Not dangerously so at this point, but concerning given the extreme stress you and the baby experienced last night. Cold exposure at your stage of pregnancy can trigger a number of complications. What kind of complications? Premature labor is the most likely concern. Your body has been through significant trauma. Sometimes that can send signals to the uterus that it's time to deliver, even when it's too early. Dr. Brennan removed the stethoscope and met Caroline's eyes directly. I want to be honest with you. I don't believe in sugarcoating medical information. You deserve to know exactly what we're dealing with. Please, I need to know. There's a reasonable chance you could go into labor in the next 48 to 72 hours. If that happens and there are complications, if the baby is in distress or positioned incorrectly, you would need an emergency cesarean section. And you can't do that here. Not safely. I have basic surgical capabilities for emergencies, but a cesarean requires a sterile operating environment, anesthesia, blood supplies ready in case of transfusion, and specialized neonatal equipment for a premature infant. DeBrennan shook her head slowly. I can deliver a baby vaginally with my eyes closed. I've done it hundreds of times, including in far more primitive conditions than this. But a surgical delivery is a different matter entirely. Carolyn stared at the ceiling, the beautiful ceiling with its dark wooden beams and its crystal chandelier. In this beautiful room, in this beautiful house, where she had been dying 24 hours ago. The roads, she said, when will they be passable? The storm isn't supposed to break for at least another 36 hours. After that, assuming the plows are working, probably another 12 to 24 hours before the main roads are clear enough for an ambulance. Dr. Brennan's voice softened slightly. We're looking at 48 hours minimum before we could get you to a hospital, even in an emergency. So if I go into labor, then I will do everything in my power to deliver your baby safely. I have medications to slow labor if it starts. I have tools for most scenarios that might occur. And I have nearly 30 years of experience bringing babies into this world. Dr. Brennan squeezed her hand firmly. I'm not telling you this to frighten you. I'm telling you because you have a right to know. And because the best thing you can do right now is remain calm, get plenty of rest, and let your body recover from the trauma it experienced. And if I need a cesarean, then we will cross that bridge if we come to it. I've performed emergency surgeries in worse conditions. It's not ideal, but it's not impossible. Dr. Brennan stood up, returning the stethoscope to her bag with practiced efficiency. For now, I want you to stay in bed as much as possible. Drink plenty of fluids, eat small, frequent meals, even if you're not hungry. And if you feel any contractions, any bleeding, any change in the baby's movements, you tell me immediately. Understood? Understood. Dr. Brennan moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the frame. Jonathan told me what happened to you. how you ended up out in that storm. Her voice had gone hard, edged with anger. I've been practicing medicine in rural Vermont for 3 decades. I've seen farm accidents and hunting mishaps and domestic violence and every kind of human cruelty you can imagine. But what that man did to you, she shook her head. That's something else entirely. He wanted me to die. Carolyn heard the words leave her mouth, flat and factual. Admitting it out loud somehow made it more real and less real simultaneously. He very nearly got his wish. Dr. Brennan's eyes held hers. I've pronounced death before. I know what it looks like when someone is past the point of saving. You were close, Caroline, very close. A few more minutes and we wouldn't be having this conversation. But I'm still here. You're still here, and that baby is still alive inside you. And whatever comes next, you've already proven that you're a survivor. Dr. Brennan offered a small, grim smile. Whatever that man told you about yourself, however he made you feel, none of it was true. You walked through a blizzard that should have killed you. That's not weakness. That's something remarkable. She left. The door closed softly behind her. Carolyn lay very still in the beautiful bed, counting her breaths, in, out, forcing her heart rate to slow, forcing her body to relax despite the terror coursing through her veins. The baby was in distress. There was no hospital, no surgical equipment, just this stranger's house and a country doctor with a leather bag, and a storm that showed no signs of ending. If complications arose, she could die. Her baby could die. Right here in this elegant guest room with its blue wallpaper and its window seat and its view of snow-covered gardens. And Derek was somewhere warm, with Vanessa, opening presents under a decorated tree, probably not thinking about her at all. The landline rang at precisely 10 in the morning, shattering the relative peace of the snowbound estate. Caroline was in the kitchen with Margaret, making a show of eating breakfast despite having no appetite whatsoever. Her stomach was too knotted with anxiety for food. But the older woman had insisted, and Carolyn had learned in the past 48 hours that arguing with Margaret was an exercise in futility. A mother needs to eat. That baby is drawing nutrients from somewhere, and if you don't provide them, she'll take them from your own body. And then where will you be? Margaret answered the phone on the third ring, listened. Her expression shifted through several distinct phases, from confusion to concern to something that looked almost like fury. Hold on, she said tightly. I'll get her. She handed the receiver to Carolyn with an expression that telegraphed bad news incoming. It's someone named Rachel Foster. She says she's your best friend, and she's been trying to reach you for almost 2 days. She sounds rather upset. Rachel, Caroline grabbed the phone like a lifeline. Hello? Oh my God, Caroline. Oh my God. Rachel's voice cracked with relief and fury, the emotions so intense they seemed to vibrate through the ancient telephone line. I've been trying to reach you for 43 hours. I've called every hospital in Vermont. I've called the police 3 times. I've driven to your house and banged on the door until your neighbors threatened to call the cops on me. Where are you? What happened? Where's Derek? I'm okay. Carolyn's voice trembled despite her efforts to remain calm. I'm safe. I'm at a house in the mountains. Someone found me and After what? Carolyn, talk to me. Derek's been on the news saying you wandered off during the storm. That you had some kind of mental breakdown. That he dropped you at a hotel and you disappeared. Is any of that true? He's lying. The words came out flat, dead. He pulled over on the highway in the middle of the blizzard. He told me to get out, said his girlfriend was pregnant and he was choosing her instead. Silence on the other end of the line. Carolyn could hear Rachel breathing heavily, processing the information. Then the explosion came. I'm going to kill him. Rachel's voice was ice and fire simultaneously. I'm going to find that worthless, narcissistic, sociopathic excuse for a human being, and I'm going to kill him with my bare hands. Then I'm going to resurrect him and kill him again. Where is he? Do you know where he is right now? With Vanessa, his assistant, the one who's also pregnant. I know. Rachel's voice dropped. Went cold, controlled in a way that was somehow more frightening than her fury. I know about Vanessa, and I know a lot more than that. I've been doing some digging since you disappeared, called in some favors, accessed some records I probably shouldn't have been able to access. What did you find? Are you sitting down? Rachel, just tell me. Rachel took a deep breath. When she spoke again, her voice was measured and precise, the tone of a prosecutor laying out evidence before a jury. Derek emptied your joint account 2 days ago, December 22nd. Every single penny, $143,000 transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Carolyn gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. The room tilted slightly, the familiar vertigo of having the ground shift beneath her feet. The house, Rachel continued, relentless. Your house in Boston. The one you've been paying the mortgage on for 4 years. It was never in your name. Derek had you sign the papers as a witness, not an owner. It's a common tactic in financial abuse situations. The victim thinks they're signing onto a shared asset, but they're actually signing away any claim to it. That can't be right. I remember signing. You signed it where he told you to sign. The signature line for a witness is on the same page as the signature line for an owner. It's easy to misdirect someone who trusts you. Rachel's voice softened with something like grief. I'm sorry, Caroline, but there's more. How can there be more? The house went on the market Christmas Eve, the same day he left you in that blizzard. He had already listed it before he even got in the car with you. The realtor confirmed it. He was planning to disappear you and liquidate everything in the same 24-hour period. Carolyn could not speak, could not breathe. The kitchen seemed to be shrinking around her. Walls closing in, ceiling pressing down. There's something else. Rachel paused, and when she continued, her voice was thick with anger and grief intertwined. Vanessa Cole isn't a new development. She's been in the picture for at least 3 years. I've found messages, emails, hotel receipts. They weren't particularly careful once I knew what to look for. 3 years. The number echoed in Caroline's mind. 3 years of lies. 3 years of believing she was loved. 3 years of sleeping next to a stranger who was planning her destruction. But the worst part, Rachel's voice broke. God, Caroline, the worst part. You know how the IVF treatments kept failing? How you blamed yourself for not being able to conceive? They said my eggs weren't viable, that my body wasn't responding to the medications. They never said that. The clinic never told you that. Rachel was crying now. Caroline could hear it. I called them, pretended to be updating your medical records. Derek canceled every single one of your appointments after the initial consultation. He told them you had changed your mind, that you had decided against fertility treatments. They had no idea you thought you were still a patient. The phone slipped from Caroline's fingers, clattered against the tile floor with a sound like breaking bones. She could hear Rachel's tiny voice calling her name. Caroline. Caroline, are you there? Caroline, please answer me. She could not bring herself to pick it up. Margaret was beside her in an instant, strong arms guiding her to a chair, warm hands pressing a glass of water into her grip. Brathimoyan, breathe, Margaret commanded. Whatever it is, whatever you just heard, you need to breathe. Think about that baby. Think about staying calm for her. Carolyn breathed in, out, but each breath felt like inhaling broken glass. Each exhale felt like releasing a piece of her soul. He did not just leave her in the snow. He had systematically destroyed her life over the course of years. The money, the house, the fertility treatments, everything she thought was real had been a carefully constructed illusion designed to keep her docile and controllable until he no longer needed her. And she had believed every lie, trusted every false word, loved a man who had never seen her as anything more than a tool to be used and discarded. Margaret picked up the phone, spoke briefly to Rachel in low, urgent tones, wrote down a number, promised to call back when Caroline was stable. Then she sat with her in the kitchen, said nothing, just held her hand while the snow finally began to stop outside, and something inside Caroline finally irrevocably shattered. The contractions started that evening. At first, Carolyn thought it was nothing. Braxton Hicks, false labor, the baby stretching. She had experienced similar sensations throughout her pregnancy, brief tightenings that came and went without progressing. But these did not go away. They came closer together, stronger, more insistent. Dr. Brennan appeared at her side within minutes of Margaret's urgent summons. How far apart? 7 minutes, maybe 6. Carolyn gripped the armrest of the couch, breathing through a contraction that felt like a vice tightening around her middle. This can't be happening. It's too early. She needs more time. Your body has been through tremendous trauma. Sometimes that sends signals to the uterus that it's time to deliver, regardless of whether the timing is ideal. Dr. Brennan checked the baby's heartbeat with her worn stethoscope. Elevated but strong. We need to monitor closely and try to slow things down if possible. Can you stop it? Sometimes we'll try everything we can. They moved Caroline to the master bedroom, the largest room in the house, easiest to work in if things became complicated. Margaret had transformed it into a makeshift delivery room with clean linens and sterilized instruments and everything Dr. Brennan might conceivably need. Jonathan helped carry supplies. His face was pale beneath his usual composure, but his hands were steady. He moved with the calm efficiency of a man who had faced crisis before and learned to function through fear. "What can I do?" he asked. "Stay close. I might need you." Rachel paced in the hallway, having arrived just hours earlier with evidence and anger in equal measure. Thomas waited downstairs, too young to be useful but too invested to leave. And Carolyn lay at the center of it all, terrified, vulnerable, 32 weeks pregnant in a stranger's house during what was supposed to be Christmas. "If I don't survive this," she said during a break between contractions, "I need you to make sure everyone knows the truth about Derek, about what he did. I can't let him win." "You're going to survive." Jonathan's voice was fierce with certainty. "You've survived too much to give up now. But if I don't, you will." He took her hand, held it firmly. "Elizabeth didn't send you to my doorstep just to have you die in my house. That's not how her cosmic delivery service works." Caroline almost laughed. Would have laughed if another contraction hadn't stolen her breath. "Just promise me," she managed when she could speak again. "Promise me my daughter will know who her mother was. Not the lies Derek told, the truth." "I promise." Jonathan's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "But you're going to tell her yourself, because you're not going anywhere." The hours blurred together in a haze of pain and fear and determination. Contractions came and went in waves, sometimes stopping for an hour, giving Caroline's exhausted body a respite, sometimes coming every 5 minutes, relentless and demanding. Dr. Brennan monitored everything with the limited tools she had available. A stethoscope, a blood pressure cuff, medications and labeled bottles that she prepared with steady hands. "The labor is stalled for now," she reported at midnight. "That's actually good news. Your body is fighting to keep this baby inside as long as possible. Let it." "How long can we stall?" "Impossible to say. Hours, maybe a day. Every hour we buy gives your daughter a better chance." Dr. Brennan checked the fetal heartbeat again. "She's a fighter, this one, just like her mother." Jonathan had not left the room. He sat in a chair by the window, close enough to help if needed, but far enough not to intrude. He had not slept, had not eaten, just watched and waited and prayed to whatever God might be listening. "You don't have to stay," Carolyn said during a quiet moment. "This could take hours. You should rest." "I'm not going anywhere," his voice left no room for argument. "When Elizabeth was dying, I sat beside her bed for 72 hours straight. I watched every breath, counted every heartbeat. I was there when she closed her eyes for the last time. That must have been unbearable." "It was, and it was also the most important thing I've ever done." He met her eyes in the dim light. "No one should face something like this alone. Whatever happens in the next few hours, you won't face it alone." Carolyn felt tears streaming down her cheeks. She had been abandoned so many times. By her parents, who died before she really knew them. By Derek, who had never loved her in the first place. By every friend she had let slip away during her marriage to a man who wanted her isolated. And now here was this stranger. This broken widower who had every reason to hide from pain. Sitting beside her, holding her hand, promising to stay. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank me when this is over." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Thank me when your daughter is healthy and Derek Mitchell is in prison and you have your whole life ahead of you." "Is that really possible? All of that?" "Yes." His voice was certain. "I've seen you survive the unsurvivable. I believe you can do anything." At 6 in the morning on December 26th, the real labor began. No more false starts. No more stalled contractions. This baby was coming, whether they were ready or not, Doctor. Brennan worked with calm efficiency, calling instructions to Margaret, who had transformed into her surgical nurse. Position changes, ice chips, breathing techniques, pain management options that were limited but better than nothing. The baby's moved into position, thought Brennan announced after an examination. Head down, engaged, this is happening. It's too early. Caroline's voice cracked with fear. She's only 32 weeks. 32 weeks is early, but survivable. Babies born at this stage have very good outcomes, especially with proper care. Dr. Brennan met her eyes. I've delivered premature babies before. More than you'd think. Most of them are healthy adults now. Your daughter has every chance of joining them. Another contraction. Caroline screamed, squeezed Jonathan's hands so hard she thought she might break his fingers. Breathe, he commanded. Focus on me. Look at my eyes. We're going to count through this together. 1, 2, 3. His voice anchored her through the pain, a lifeline in a sea of agony. She focused on his face, on his dark eyes, on the steady rhythm of his counting. Good, Brent said when the contraction passed. You're dilating quickly. This baby is in a hurry to meet the world. The next hour was a blur. Push, rest, push again, breathe, don't push yet, now push. Carolyn stopped thinking, stopped feeling anything except the primal need to bring her daughter into the world. Her entire existence narrowed to this single purpose. And then, the cord is wrapped around the neck. The words cut through the haze like a knife. Carolyn saw the fear flash across Dr. Brennan's face before she could mask it. What does that mean? It means I need to work quickly. Stay calm. Let me do my job. Dr. Brennan's hands moved with precision, manipulating the baby's position in ways Caroline could not see but could feel. The pressure was immense. The fear was suffocating. One more push, Doctor, Brennan commanded. Give me everything you have, now. Caroline pushed, screamed, gave everything she had and more. Silence, the worst kind of silence. A void where a cry should be. Then, a wail, small and furious and absolutely beautiful. The most perfect sound Caroline had ever heard. It's a girl. Dr. Brennan's voice cracked with relief and emotion. A healthy, angry, perfect girl. They placed the baby on Caroline's chest, still wet from birth, still screaming in outrage at being brought into the world. Impossibly tiny and impossibly perfect. Caroline looked down at her daughter, dark hair plastered to a wrinkled skull, eyes squeezed shut against the light, fists waving in protest at the indignity of existence. Hello, Caroline whispered. Hello, Grace Elizabeth. I'm your mommy, and I'm never, ever going to let anyone hurt you. The baby opened her eyes, just for a moment, dark blue like all newborns, but with something fierce in them. Something that spoke of survival and defiance and a refusal to be defeated. She's beautiful. Jonathan's voice was thick with emotion. She's absolutely beautiful. Grace Elizabeth Mitchell, Carolyn announced to the room. Grace because only Grace brought us here. Elizabeth for the woman whose home saved us both. Jonathan made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. His hand trembled as he reached out to touch the baby's cheek. Elizabeth would be honored, he managed. Dr. Brennan allowed them a moment of peace. Then she got back to work, checking vital signs and cleaning up and doing all the things that needed to be done after a birth. 5 pounds, 2 ounces, she announced. Small but healthy, lungs sound clear, heartbeat is strong. Considering everything you both went through, this is nothing short of a miracle. A Christmas miracle, Margaret said from the doorway, tears streaming down her face. A day late, but still a miracle. 2 days after Grace's birth, the roads finally cleared. Police arrived first, 2 state troopers in a cruiser that struggled up the still icy driveway, their faces grim with the weight of what they had come to discuss. Mrs. Mitchell, the older officer, removed his hat as he entered the library where Caroline waited. I'm Sergeant Robert Walsh. This is Officer Jennifer Davis. We've been investigating your case since your friend filed the missing person report. I'm happy to give a statement. Carolyn sat in the chair by the fire, Grace sleeping peacefully in her arms. I've been waiting to tell my side of the story. The statement took nearly 3 hours. Caroline recounted everything in precise detail. The drive from Boston, Derek's phone buzzing with messages he tried to hide. The moment he pulled over on the empty highway, his exact words when he told her to get out. She told them about the blizzard, the cold, the desperate walk through snow that should have killed her, the doorstep where she collapsed. She told them about the financial betrayal, the emptied accounts, the house sold from under her, the 3 years of affairs carefully hidden behind lies and gaslighting. She told them about the IVF sabotage, the appointments canceled in her name, the years of believing her body was broken while her husband systematically prevented the pregnancy they were supposedly trying for. When she finished, both officers looked shaken. "This is attempted murder," Sergeant Walsh said flatly. "Premeditated attempted murder. He abandoned you in conditions that he knew would likely kill you, and he did so after carefully arranging his finances to benefit from your death." "Can you prove that?" "We have GPS data showing exactly where he stopped the car and for how long. Phone records showing he was texting his mistress at the time. Bank transfers that demonstrate premeditation." The sergeant's jaw tightened. "The evidence is overwhelming. We've already issued a warrant for his arrest. He's been on television calling me mentally unstable. We've seen the interviews. They won't help him." Officer Davis spoke for the first time. "The physical evidence contradicts his story at every point. He claims he dropped you at a hotel. GPS shows he stopped on Route 7, 15 miles from the nearest building. He claims you wandered off during a mental health crisis. The timeline proves he left you there deliberately. What happens now?" "Now we arrest him. He's been staying at his mistress's parents' house in Stowe. We have officers en route." Sergeant Walsh stood. "I've been doing this job for 23 years, Mrs. Mitchell. I've seen a lot of terrible things, but what your husband did to you..." He shook his head. "That's something else entirely. You're incredibly brave to have survived, and we're going to make sure he pays for what he did." Derek Mitchell was arrested that evening. Rachel brought the news, having followed the story obsessively through her network of contacts and favors. "They got him at dinner," she reported with grim satisfaction. "He was sitting down to a 7-course meal with Vanessa's family when the state police showed up. The look on his face in the mugshot is priceless. He couldn't believe it was actually happening." "What are the charges?" "Attempted murder in the first degree, reckless endangerment, financial fraud. The prosecutor is considering adding additional counts for the IVF sabotage once they finish reviewing the medical records." Rachel grinned fiercely. "His daddy's lawyers are already circling, but this isn't something money can make disappear. There's too much evidence, too many witnesses, and too much public outrage." For the first time since Christmas Eve, Carolyn felt something like hope. Derek was in custody. The evidence was overwhelming. Justice was finally within reach. She held Grace a little tighter and allowed herself to believe that the nightmare might finally be over. She had no idea how wrong she was. The Mitchell family's counterattack came exactly 1 week after Derek's arrest. Carolyn was still recovering at Jonathan's estate, still building her strength, still learning to be a mother to a premature baby who needed extra care and attention. She had just finished feeding Grace when Margaret appeared in the doorway with an envelope in her hand and a look of barely controlled fury on her face. "This came by courier," Margaret said, her voice tight, "from a law firm in Boston. Whitmore, Blackstone and Associates." Carolyn took the envelope with trembling fingers. She had heard of Whitmore Blackstone. Everyone in Boston had heard of them. They were the lawyers you hired when you had unlimited money and no conscience. The lawyers who made problems disappear, regardless of how ugly those problems might be. She opened the envelope. "Read the contents. Read them again, because surely she had misunderstood." "What is it?" Jonathan appeared behind Margaret, concern etched into every line of his face. "Caroline, you've gone pale. What does it say?" "They're suing for custody." Caroline's voice sounded distant to her own ears, like someone speaking underwater. "Derek's parents. They're filing for emergency custody of Grace." "On what grounds?" "Mental instability. They claim I'm suffering from postpartum psychosis, that I'm a danger to my own child." Carolyn's hands were shaking so badly the paper rattled. "They have statements from 3 psychiatrists I've never met. They have a sworn affidavit from Vanessa Cole claiming I threatened to kill myself and the baby during my pregnancy. They have—" Her voice broke. She could not continue. Jonathan took the papers from her hands, read them with the practiced eye of someone who had dealt with corporate lawyers his entire career. His expression grew darker with every page. "This is lies," he said flatly. "All of it. Fabricated evidence and paid expert witnesses. This is what happens when you have enough money to manufacture reality. Can they do this? Can they actually take my daughter?" "They can try." Jonathan's jaw was set. "But they won't succeed. I'll make sure of that." But Carolyn could see the concern in his eyes. The Mitchells had resources she could not begin to match. They had lawyers who specialized in making the impossible possible. They had connections in every corner of the legal system, and she had nothing, no money, no home, no support system beyond the strangers who had taken her in out of kindness. "There's more," Jonathan said quietly, reading further into the documents. "They're also filing a motion to have all charges against Derek reduced to misdemeanors, claiming the prosecutor is biased, claiming the evidence was obtained illegally, claiming you fabricated the entire story as revenge for his affair. That's insane. The GPS data alone, they have experts who will testify that GPS data can be manipulated. They have witnesses who will claim they saw you at a hotel that night. They have a narrative that paints you as a scorned woman willing to destroy her husband's life rather than accept that he had moved on. None of that is true. Truth doesn't matter to people like this." Jonathan set the papers down on the table. "What matters is what they can make a judge believe. And with enough money and enough expert witnesses and enough legal maneuvering, they can make a judge believe almost anything." Caroline sank into a chair, Grace still cradled against her chest. The baby slept on, oblivious to the storm gathering around her, oblivious to the powerful forces that wanted to tear her away from her mother before she was even a month old. "What do I do?" Caroline whispered. "I can't fight them. I have nothing." "You have me." Jonathan crouched down to meet her eyes. "You have my resources, my connections, my lawyers, who are very, very good at their job." His voice was fierce with determination. "They want a war? Fine. We'll give them a war, and we'll win. Why would you do this for me? You barely know me. This is going to cost a fortune. It's going to consume your life for months, maybe years. Why would you?" "Because Elizabeth would have wanted me to." Jonathan's voice cracked slightly. "Because you appeared on my doorstep when I was ready to give up on everything. Because watching you fight has reminded me what it means to be alive." He reached out and touched Grace's tiny hand. "And because this little girl deserves a mother who loves her, not grandparents who see her as a prize to be won." Carolyn felt tears streaming down her face. Again, she had cried more in the past 2 weeks than in the entire previous decade of her life. "Thank you," she managed. "I don't know how I'll ever—" "Don't thank me yet." Jonathan stood. "Thank me when we've won. Now I need to make some phone calls. The hearing for emergency custody is in 3 days. We have a lot of work to do." The courtroom was smaller than Caroline had expected. Wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lights and that particular institutional smell that seemed to permeate every government building. The judge's bench loomed at the front of the room, empty for now but radiating authority nonetheless. Carolyn sat at a table on the left side of the courtroom with her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Helena Cross, whom Jonathan had flown in from New York. Helena was legendary in family law circles. She had never lost a custody case in 15 years of practice. Carolyn hoped that record would hold. Across the aisle sat Edward and Marguerite Mitchell, Derek's parents. Edward was a larger version of his son, the same blue eyes and chiseled features, but with silver hair and the confident bearing of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. Marguerite was elegant in a cold, untouchable way, her designer suit probably worth more than Caroline had earned in a year of nursing. Between them sat their legal team, 4 lawyers from Whitmore, Blackstone, all in identical dark suits, all with the hungry expression of predators scenting blood. Derek was not present. He was still in custody awaiting trial, though his family's lawyers were working around the clock to secure his release on bail. Vanessa was there, though, sitting in the gallery behind the Mitchells, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, her face arranged in an expression of sympathetic concern that made Caroline's blood boil. "All rise." The bailiff's voice echoed through the room. Everyone stood as Judge Patricia Holloway entered and took her seat. She was older than Caroline had expected, with steel gray hair and reading glasses perched on her nose. Her expression gave nothing away. "Be seated." The judge shuffled through papers on her desk. "We're here today for an emergency custody hearing in the matter of Grace Elizabeth Mitchell, a minor child currently in the care of her mother, Caroline Mitchell. The petitioners, Edward and Marguerite Mitchell, are seeking temporary custody pending resolution of criminal charges against the child's father, Derek Mitchell." She looked up, fixing the Mitchell's lawyers with a hard stare. "I've reviewed the filings. I have to say, this is one of the more unusual custody petitions I've seen. You're asking me to remove a newborn infant from her mother's care based on allegations of mental instability. Yet I see no evidence of any psychiatric evaluation of Mrs. Mitchell conducted by a neutral party." "Your Honor," the lead Mitchell lawyer rose smoothly, "we have statements from 3 board-certified psychiatrists who have never examined Mrs. Mitchell in person." "I can read, counsel." The judge's voice was dry. "I also note that all 3 psychiatrists are affiliated with medical practices that have received significant donations from the Mitchell Family Foundation over the past decade." The lawyer's smile flickered but held. "The qualifications of our experts are beyond question. The question isn't their qualifications. The question is their objectivity." Judge Holloway turned to Helena. "Ms. Cross, I understand you have a response to the petitioner's claims." Helena rose with the fluid grace of someone who had done this 1,000 times. "Your Honor, my client is happy to submit to any psychiatric evaluation this court deems appropriate. She has nothing to hide. She is a devoted mother who has been through a horrific trauma, and she is fighting for the right to raise her own child. The petitioners claim Mrs. Mitchell is mentally unstable." "The petitioners are lying." Helena's voice was sharp. "And I can prove it." She gestured to her paralegal, who began distributing packets of documents to the judge and opposing counsel. "What you have before you is a comprehensive timeline of Derek Mitchell's abuse of his wife over 6 years of marriage, financial manipulation, social isolation, gaslighting, sabotage of her fertility treatments, and ultimately, attempted murder." "Objection!" The Mitchell lawyer was on his feet. "Those charges haven't been proven. They haven't been tried yet," Helena corrected. "There's a significant difference. The evidence is overwhelming. GPS data shows exactly where Derek Mitchell stopped his car on Christmas Eve. Weather records confirm conditions were life-threatening. Medical records from the ER confirm Mrs. Mitchell was suffering from severe hypothermia when she was found. Your Honor, the defense is trying to prejudice this court against my clients. Your clients are trying to take a baby away from her mother to protect their son from the consequences of his actions." Helena's voice could have cut glass. "Let's be clear about what's happening here. Derek Mitchell attempted to murder his wife. When that failed, his family launched a coordinated campaign to discredit her. They manufactured evidence of mental illness. They paid experts to lie, and now they're asking this court to reward their deception by giving them custody of an infant who is thriving in her mother's care. Mrs. Mitchell is homeless and unemployed. Mrs. Mitchell is staying with a family friend while she recovers from nearly dying." Helena turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness, someone who can speak to Mrs. Mitchell's mental state and her fitness as a mother." "Very well. Call your witness." "I call Dr. Patricia Brennan." Dr. Brennan entered the courtroom and took the stand. She looked out of place in the formal setting, her practical clothing and no-nonsense demeanor a stark contrast to the polished lawyers surrounding her. Helena led her through the events of Christmas Eve and the days that followed, the near death from hypothermia, the premature labor, the difficult delivery, the cord wrapped around the baby's neck. "And in your professional's opinion, De Brennan, how did Mrs. Mitchell handle these crises?" "With remarkable composure." De Brennan's voice was steady. "I've been practicing medicine for 30 years. I've seen people fall apart under far less pressure. Mrs. Mitchell remained calm. She followed instructions. She fought to protect her baby even when her own life was in danger. If she were mentally unstable, she would have crumbled. She didn't." "And how would you describe her interactions with her daughter since the birth?" "Loving, attentive, appropriate in every way." Dr. Brennan looked directly at the judge. That baby is thriving. She's gaining weight on schedule despite being premature. She's hitting developmental milestones. She's bonded with her mother in exactly the way a healthy infant should. Her voice hardened. Taking her away from her mother at this stage would cause genuine psychological harm. I would stake my medical license on that assessment. The Mitchell lawyers tried to undermine Dr. Brennan's testimony on cross-examination. They pointed out that she was a country doctor, not a specialist. They suggested her emotional involvement with the case had compromised her objectivity. They implied she had been paid to testify favorably. Dr. Brennan shut down every attack with the calm efficiency of someone who had been dealing with difficult people her entire career. "I delivered that baby in a blizzard with no hospital backup," she said at one point, her voice icy. "I watched her mother nearly die protecting her. And now you're suggesting I can't objectively assess their relationship? With respect, counsel, I've seen more in 3 decades of rural medicine than your entire firm has seen in your climate-controlled offices." The Mitchell lawyers wisely decided to end their cross-examination after that. Helena called 2 more witnesses, Margaret, who testified about Caroline's devoted care of Grace over the past 3 weeks, and a court-appointed psychiatrist who had evaluated Caroline 2 days earlier and found no evidence whatsoever of mental illness. By the time Helena rested her case, the Mitchell lawyers looked considerably less confident than they had at the start of the hearing. But they had one more card to play. "Your Honor, we'd like to call Vanessa Cole to the stand." Caroline's stomach dropped. She watched Vanessa walk to the witness stand, watched her place her hand on the Bible and swear to tell the truth, watched her arrange her face in that expression of concerned sincerity that seemed to come so naturally. "Ms. Cole," the Mitchell lawyer began, "you were in a relationship with Derek Mitchell during his marriage to the defendant. Is that correct?" "Yes." Vanessa's voice was soft, reluctant. "I'm not proud of it, but yes." "And during that relationship, did Mrs. Mitchell ever discover the affair?" "Yes. About a year ago, she found some text messages on Derek's phone." "And what was her reaction?" "She was angry, understandably so." Vanessa paused, seemingly gathering herself. But the anger was excessive, violent. She threw things, screamed, threatened to kill herself and the baby she was carrying. "Objection!" Helena was on her feet. "This is completely fabricated." "Let the witness finish," the judge said. "But Ms. Cole, I warn you, perjury in a custody hearing carries serious consequences." Vanessa's composure flickered for just a moment, but she pressed on. "I was there when it happened. Derek called me terrified. He said Caroline was out of control, that she had threatened to drive off a bridge if he left her." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I know I'm not the victim here. I know I did something wrong, but I'm scared for that baby. I've seen what Caroline is capable of when she's angry." "No further questions." Helena rose slowly. Her expression was calm, but Caroline could see the fury simmering beneath the surface. "Ms. Cole, you said this incident occurred approximately a year ago, is that correct?" "Yes." "So roughly December of last year?" Yes, around then." "Interesting." Helena picked up a document from her table. "Because I have phone records showing that Derek Mitchell's phone was not used to call you at any point during December of last year. In fact, the first call between your phone and his during that month occurred on December 28th, 3 days after Christmas." Vanessa's face went pale. I might be confused about the exact date." "You might be confused about more than that." Helena's voice sharpened. "Because I also have records from Mrs. Mitchell's obstetrician showing that she wasn't pregnant a year ago. She conceived in late April. The pregnancy you claim she threatened didn't exist yet." The timeline might be different than I remember." "Ms. Cole, are you aware that you just committed perjury?" "Objection!" the Mitchell lawyer was shouting now. "Counsel is badgering the witness." "Counsel is exposing a liar," Helena shot back. "Ms. Cole, let me ask you directly. Did the incident you just described actually happen? Or were you asked to testify falsely by the Mitchell family?" Vanessa's composure crumbled completely. She looked desperately toward the Mitchell table, toward Edward Mitchell's cold blue eyes, toward the lawyers who had coached her on what to say. And then she looked at Carolyn, at the woman whose life she had helped destroy, at the mother holding her sleeping baby with fierce protectiveness. Something shifted in Vanessa's expression, something that looked almost like shame. I, her voice was barely audible. I need to speak with my own lawyer. Your Honor, I move to strike Mrs. Cole's entire testimony as perjured, Helena said immediately. Motion granted. Judge Holloway's voice was ice. And Mrs. Cole, you will remain available for questioning by the district attorney regarding potential criminal charges. This court does not tolerate lying under oath. The hearing adjourned for lunch. When it resumed, Judge Holloway delivered her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, I find no credible basis for the petitioner's claims that Caroline Mitchell is mentally unfit to care for her child. The petition for emergency custody is denied. Caroline sagged with relief. It was over. She had won. But Judge Holloway wasn't finished. However, she continued, given the complexity of this case and the serious allegations involved, I am ordering a full custody evaluation to be completed over the next 90 days. During this time, the child will remain in Mrs. Mitchell's care, but there will be regular home visits by a court-appointed social worker to ensure the child's well-being. She fixed both legal teams with a hard stare. I expect both parties to cooperate fully with this evaluation. Any attempts to interfere with or manipulate the process will be dealt with severely. Is that understood? Yes, Your Honor, both sides said in unison. Court is adjourned. Carolyn walked out of the courthouse into the cold January air. Grace was still asleep in her carrier, oblivious to the battle that had just been fought on her behalf. Jonathan waited on the steps, his face anxious until he saw Caroline's expression. We won? For now. Caroline felt the weight of the words settle on her shoulders. But it's not over. We have 90 days of evaluation. 90 days for them to find another way to attack us. Then we'll be ready for every attack. Jonathan took the carrier from her trembling hands. Come on, let's go home. Home, the word felt strange in Carolyn's mouth. She had thought her home was the brownstone in Boston, the home Derek had stolen from her, the home that had never really been hers at all. But as they drove through the winter landscape toward the stone estate in the mountains, Caroline realized that home wasn't a building. It was the people who made you feel safe, the people who fought for you when you couldn't fight for yourself. She had found that somehow, in the strangest possible circumstances, in the aftermath of the worst night of her life. Maybe Elizabeth really had sent her to that doorstep. Maybe there was some kind of cosmic design at work, bringing broken people together to heal each other. Or maybe it was just luck, random chance in an indifferent universe. Either way, Caroline was grateful. Grateful for Jonathan, for Margaret, for Dr. Brennan and Rachel, and everyone who had stood beside her in the storm. But as she watched the bare trees pass by the car window, she couldn't shake the feeling that the storm wasn't over yet. The Mitchells had lost this battle. They wouldn't lose the next one so easily. 2 weeks after the custody hearing, Caroline discovered something that shattered the fragile peace she had begun to build. She was in Jonathan's study, looking for a book he had recommended, when she accidentally knocked a folder off his desk. Papers scattered across the floor. As she knelt to gather them, a newspaper clipping caught her eye. The headline read, "Wealthy financier questioned in wife's death." There was a photograph. Jonathan, looking younger but unmistakably himself, being escorted by police officers into a building. His face was haunted, defensive, nothing like the gentle man she had come to know. Carolyn's hands trembled as she read the article. Jonathan Ashford, 42, was questioned today by investigators regarding the circumstances of his wife Elizabeth's death. Sources close to the investigation say concerns were raised about the timeline of events and discrepancies in Ashford's initial statement. The article was dated 3 years ago, just months after Elizabeth had supposedly died of cancer. Carolyn heard footsteps in the hallway. She quickly gathered the papers and put them back in the folder, but her mind was racing. Jonathan had told her Elizabeth died of cancer. He had never mentioned police questioning, never mentioned an investigation. What else hadn't he told her? That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the newspaper photograph, saw Jonathan's face, guarded and defensive, saw the police officers flanking him like he was a criminal. Had she made a terrible mistake? Had she traded one dangerous man for another? The questions circled in her head like vultures, picking at the trust she had so carefully begun to rebuild. The next morning, she confronted him. "I found something in your study," she said without preamble. "An article from 3 years ago about you being questioned by police after Elizabeth's death." Jonathan went very still. The color drained from his face. "Caroline, you told me she died of cancer. You never said anything about an investigation, about being questioned." Her voice shook with a mixture of fear and anger. "What aren't you telling me?" Jonathan sank into a chair. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he began to speak in a voice heavy with old pain. "Elizabeth did die of cancer. That part was true. But the way it happened, it wasn't simple." He took a shaky breath. "She was in so much pain at the end. The cancer had spread everywhere. The doctors said weeks, maybe a month, but she was suffering. Every day, more suffering. She begged me to help her. Begged me to make it stop." Carolyn felt ice spreading through her chest. "Jonathan, I didn't do what she asked. I couldn't. But I thought about it. God help me, I thought about it." His voice broke. "I talked to her doctors about increasing her pain medication, about making her comfortable, and someone, a nurse I think, reported that conversation to the authorities. So the investigation was based on the suspicion that I had somehow hastened her death, that I had euthanized my own wife." Jonathan met her eyes and she saw the devastation there, the guilt that had never fully healed. "They investigated for 2 months, interviewed everyone who had been in the house during her final days, reviewed her medical records, analyzed her toxicology reports. And what did they find? That she'd died of cancer, exactly as the death certificate stated, that I had done nothing illegal, that I was just a man who had watched his wife die in agony and was now being tortured by the same people who should have been offering condolences." Jonathan buried his face in his hands. The investigation was closed. No charges were ever filed. But the rumors never completely went away. People whispered. Business associates looked at me differently. Even some friends stopped calling. He laughed bitterly. "That's the real reason I became a recluse, not just grief, shame. The knowledge that people thought I was capable of killing the woman I loved." Carolyn stood frozen, processing everything he had said. Her fear warred with something else, something that felt like recognition, like understanding. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked finally. "Because I was afraid." Jonathan looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed. "Afraid that if you knew, you'd look at me differently. You'd wonder if it was true. You'd question everything about me the same way everyone else did. I've been questioning you since last night. I know. And I deserve that." He stood up slowly. "Caroline, I swear to you on Elizabeth's grave that I did nothing to hasten her death. I loved her more than my own life. I would have traded places with her in a heartbeat if I could have. But I couldn't save her. I could only watch her die. And that failure has haunted me every day since." Carolyn thought about Derek, about the lies he had told so smoothly, so convincingly, about how easily she had believed him because she wanted to believe. Was Jonathan telling the truth? Or was he just another scaled manipulator, wearing a different mask? She looked at him, really looked, saw the pain in his eyes, the trembling in his hands, the way he held himself like a man awaiting a verdict that could destroy him. Derek had never looked like that. Derek had always been smooth, confident, unshakable. Derek had never shown vulnerability because Derek had never felt any. This was different. This was real. "I believe you," Caroline said slowly, "but I need you to understand something. I spent 6 years married to a man who lied to me about everything. I can't go through that again. If there's anything else, anything at all that you haven't told me, I need to know. Now. There's nothing else, I swear it. Then we start fresh, from this moment. Complete honesty, no matter how painful." She met his eyes firmly. "Can you do that?" "Yes." Jonathan's voice was raw. "Yes, I promise." Carolyn nodded slowly. The trust that had been shaken wasn't fully restored. That would take time. But it hadn't been destroyed either. It had been tested. And perhaps that was necessary. Perhaps all trust needed to be tested to prove its worth. "Okay," she said. "Then let's move forward." Jonathan crossed the room and took her hands in his. His grip was desperate, grateful, the grip of a man who had been given a second chance he didn't expect to receive. Thank you, he whispered, for believing me, for giving me the chance to explain. Don't make me regret it. I won't. I swear I won't. They stood together in the morning light, two damaged people learning to trust again. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But it was possible. And sometimes, possible was enough. 3 weeks after the custody hearing, Vanessa Cole appeared at the estate. Caroline was in the nursery when Margaret knocked on the door, her expression troubled. "There's someone here to see you," Margaret said carefully. "Someone I don't think you want to see. But she insists it's important." "Who is it?" Margaret's face told her everything she needed to know. Carolyn's first instinct was to refuse, to send Vanessa away, to never look at the woman who had helped destroy her marriage and then lied under oath to try to take her daughter. But something in Margaret's expression gave her pause. "She looks scared," Margaret said quietly. "Really scared." And she came alone. Carolyn looked down at Grace, sleeping peacefully in her crib. Her daughter, the one good thing that had come from 6 years of lies and manipulation. "Send her up," Carolyn said finally, "but stay close. I don't trust her." Vanessa appeared in the doorway a few minutes later. She looked different than she had at the hearing. The polished confidence was gone, replaced by dark circles under her eyes and a nervous tension in her shoulders. Her pregnant belly was more pronounced now, maybe 6 months along. "Thank you for seeing me," Vanessa said. Her voice was hoarse. "I know I don't deserve it. I know what I did at the hearing was unforgivable. You tried to take my daughter with lies." "I know." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "I know, and I'm sorry. That's not why I'm here." "Then why are you here?" Vanessa took a shaky breath, looked around as if checking for eavesdroppers. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I think they're going to kill me." Carolyn stared at her. Whatever she had expected Vanessa to say, it wasn't that. "What are you talking about?" "The Mitchells, Edward and Marguerite." Vanessa's composure cracked completely. Tears streamed down her face as the words poured out in a rush. "After I broke down at the hearing, they were furious. They said I had ruined everything, that I was a liability now." She wrapped her arms around her pregnant belly protectively. "Derek called me from jail. He said if I ever testified against the family again, I'd disappear. He said it so calmly, like he was discussing the weather. Like making people disappear was just something he did. Derek says a lot of things to scare people. He's done it before." Vanessa's voice dropped even lower. "There was a woman, before you, Amanda Reyes. She was his girlfriend at Harvard. She filed a police report against him and then suddenly withdrew all the charges. She got paid off and agreed to stay quiet. I know about Amanda. Rachel found the records. But do you know what happened to her?" Vanessa's eyes were wild now. 3 months after she took the money, she died. Car accident. Single vehicle crash on a rainy night. The police ruled it accidental. Carolyn felt ice spreading through her chest. "You think Derek killed her?" "I don't know. Maybe, or maybe the family had it done." Vanessa shook her head. "I used to think I was special. I used to believe Derek when he said he loved me. That you were the problem. That once you were gone, we'd be happy together." She laughed bitterly. "I was so stupid. He used me the same way he used you. The same way he uses everyone. I'm carrying his child, and he still calls me from jail to threaten me. He still makes me feel like nothing. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I have something. Something that could help your case." Vanessa reached into her purse and pulled out a USB drive. Recordings, emails, text messages, everything Derek ever sent me about you, about his plans, about what the family was willing to do to protect him. Caroline took the drive with trembling fingers. "Why didn't you give this to the police?" "Because I was scared. Because I thought they would protect me." Vanessa's voice broke. "But after the hearing, I realized they were never going to protect me. I was just another tool to them, another weapon to use and discard." She looked at Caroline with something like desperation in her eyes. "I know I don't deserve your help. I know I was part of the problem. But I'm pregnant with his baby too. I'm scared for my child the same way you're scared for yours." She gestured at the drive in Caroline's hand. Everything you need to destroy them is on there. Bank records, communications with their lawyers, instructions for how to discredit you, even discussions about what to do if Derek's charges couldn't be dismissed. What kind of discussions? Vanessa hesitated, then spoke the words that changed everything. They talked about making sure you had an accident before the trial, something that would look natural, something that couldn't be traced back to them by any of them. The ice in Caroline's chest crystallized into something harder, something colder. They want me dead. They want you silenced, permanently if necessary. Vanessa wiped her eyes. I thought I could ignore it, pretend I hadn't heard it, but then Derek threatened me too, and I realized that if they'd kill you, they'd kill anyone who threatened them, including me. Carolyn looked down at the USB drive. Such a small thing, such an enormous weapon. What do you want in exchange for this? Nothing. Vanessa shook her head. I just want out. I want to take my baby and disappear before they decide I'm too much of a liability to keep around. She paused, and I want to apologize for everything I did, for believing Derek's lies, for helping him hurt you. She looked at Grace's crib with an expression of profound sadness. I used to tell myself you deserved what happened, that you must have done something to make him treat you that way. It was easier than admitting that I was helping destroy an innocent woman's life. A sob escaped her. I'm so sorry, Caroline. I'm so sorry. Carolyn studied the woman in front of her, the mistress who had stolen her husband, the liar who had tried to take her daughter, the person she had every right to hate. But all she saw was another victim, another woman manipulated by Derek Mitchell's charm and cruelty, another mother terrified for her child. The guest cottage, Carolyn heard herself saying. It's separate from the main house, private. You can stay there while we figure out what to do with this information. Vanessa looked up in shock. You're helping me? I'm helping your baby. Caroline's voice was firm. That child is innocent. Just like Grace, he or she doesn't deserve to suffer because of their father's crimes. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just give me everything you have on the Mitchells and pray that it's enough to finish them. The evidence on Vanessa's USB drive was worse than Caroline could have imagined. Emails between Derek and his father discussing how to handle the Caroline situation. Text messages to fixers and lawyers, all carefully worded but unmistakably sinister. Financial records showing payments to mysterious offshore accounts that coincided with the disappearance of problematic witnesses. And most damning of all, recorded phone calls between Derek and his mother, discussing what to do if the criminal charges couldn't be dismissed. We could arrange something, Marguerite's voice said on one recording. Something quiet, something that couldn't be traced. A car accident, a break-in gone wrong. There are people who specialize in these things. And the baby, Derek asked? The baby stays with us, obviously. That child is a Mitchell, regardless of who its mother was. Was. Carolyn played the word back 3 times. Was, as if she was already dead in their minds. Jonathan sat beside her in the library, his face pale with fury as they listened to recording after recording. This is conspiracy to commit murder, he said when they finished. Actual conspiracy. They're discussing killing you like they're planning a business acquisition. The question is what to do with it. Carolyn ejected the USB drive and held it carefully. I could go to the police, turn it over as evidence. That's risky. The Mitchells have connections everywhere. What if someone in the department tips them off? Jonathan shook his head. We need to be strategic. Make copies, store them in multiple locations. Make sure that if anything happens to you, this evidence goes public automatically. If anything happens to me, Carolyn felt a chill despite the warmth of the fire. You think they'd really try something? After all this? I think desperate people do desperate things, and the Mitchells are very desperate right now. Jonathan met her eyes. The trial starts in 3 weeks. If Derek is convicted, the family's reputation is destroyed. Their business relationships will collapse. Their social standing will evaporate. They've built their entire identity around power and respectability. Losing that would be worse than death to them. So they'd kill to preserve it, without hesitation. Carolyn looked at the USB drive in her hand. Such a small thing, such enormous power. Then we use it, she said, not just for the criminal trial, for everything. We expose them completely, every line, every crime, every threat. Let the whole world see who the Mitchell family really is. That's dangerous. If they find out you're planning to go public before you actually do it, then I need to move fast. Carolyn stood up, a new determination burning in her chest. I'm done being afraid of them. I'm done running and hiding and waiting for the next attack. They tried to kill me in a blizzard. They tried to take my daughter with lies. Now they're plotting to murder me to protect their precious reputation. She looked at Jonathan, at this man who had saved her life and stood beside her through everything that followed. I walk through hell to survive, and I'll walk through it again if I have to. But I'm not going to let them win. Not now, not ever. The attack came 3 days before Derek's trial was set to begin. Carolyn was driving back from a meeting with Helena Cross, her lawyer, who was preparing her testimony for the prosecution. Grace was at home with Margaret. The winter sun was already setting, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of orange and gold. She was thinking about what she would say on the witness stand, how she would describe the moment Derek told her to get out of the car, the look in his eyes, the complete absence of humanity. She didn't notice the black SUV following her until it was too late. The impact came from behind, sudden and violent, sending Caroline's car skidding across the icy road. She fought the wheel, struggling to regain control, but the SUV hit her again. Harder this time. Her car spun twice and slammed into a guardrail. For a moment, everything was silent. Carolyn sat dazed in the driver's seat, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead, airbag deflating against her chest. Then she saw the SUV pulling up alongside her, saw the window rolling down, saw the face of the driver. It was a man she didn't recognize, hard-featured, cold-eyed, professional. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said calmly, "I think it's time we had a conversation." Carolyn's hand fumbled for her phone. She had to call someone. Jonathan, the police, anyone. But the man already had a gun pointed at her window. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." His voice was conversational, almost friendly. "This doesn't have to be messy. You just need to come with me, answer some questions, tell us where the recordings are." "I don't know what you're talking about. Please don't insult my intelligence." The man smiled, but his eyes remained dead. "Vanessa Cole has been staying at your estate for a week. We know she gave you something. We just need to know where you've hidden it. If anything happens to me, that evidence goes public automatically. Yes, we assumed you'd set up some kind of dead man switch." The man nodded appreciatively. "That's why we're not going to kill you. We're just going to have a long, detailed conversation about exactly where those recordings are stored. And then you're going to disable whatever safeguards you have put in place." You will." His voice hardened. "Because if you don't, we'll find other ways to persuade you. Your daughter, for instance. Such a beautiful baby. It would be tragic if something happened to her." The threat to Grace shattered something in Caroline. Fear transformed into rage. Pure, white-hot rage that burned away everything else. "You touch my daughter," she said, her voice deadly calm, "and I will destroy you. I will destroy everyone connected to the Mitchell family. I will burn their empire to the ground and salt the earth so nothing ever grows there again." The man laughed. Strong words from someone with a gun pointed at her head. Strong words from someone with nothing left to lose. She looked him directly in the eyes, held his gaze without flinching. "I've already died once, on a frozen highway, in a blizzard, left there by a man I thought loved me." Her voice was ice. "You think I'm afraid of you? You think a gun scares me? I walked out of hell with my baby still alive inside me. I gave birth in a stranger's house with no hospital and no backup. I've faced down the entire Mitchell family in a courtroom and won." She smiled, a cold, dangerous smile that made the gunman's eyes flicker with uncertainty. "So go ahead, shoot me. See what happens when that evidence goes public. See what happens when the whole world learns that the Mitchell family murdered the woman who was about to testify against their precious son." Silence stretched between them. The gunman's finger rested on the trigger. Carolyn's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't look away, didn't flinch, didn't show an ounce of the terror clawing at her insides. Finally, the man lowered his gun. "This isn't over," he said. "No," Carolyn agreed, "it isn't. But when it's finished, you and everyone who sent you will be in prison. Count on it." The SUV pulled away, disappearing into the gathering darkness. Caroline sat in her wrecked car, trembling with adrenaline and fear. She picked up her phone with shaking hands and dialed Jonathan's number. "They came for me," she said when he answered. "On the road. A man with a gun. They wanted the recordings." "Are you hurt? Where are you?" "I'm okay. Shaken. The car is totaled, but I'm okay." She took a deep breath, forcing herself to think clearly. "Jonathan, they threatened Grace. They said they'd use her to make me talk. I'll double the security immediately. No one gets near that baby. It's not enough. None of it is enough." Carolyn stared out at the empty road, at the darkness closing in from all sides. "We need to end this, now, before they try again." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we release everything, tonight, to every major news outlet simultaneously. Every recording, every email, every piece of evidence we have." Her voice hardened. "They wanted a war. They've got one. But we're not going to fight it in courtrooms and back channels. We're going to fight it in the court of public opinion. Let the whole world see who the Mitchell family really is." "That's incredibly risky. Once it's out there, we can't control the narrative. I don't want to control it. I want to destroy them." Caroline's grip tightened on the phone. "They've had power over me for too long. They've made me afraid, made me hide, made me second-guess every decision. No more. Tonight, we burn it all down." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I'll call my media contacts," Jonathan said finally. "Rachel has connections at 3 major networks. We can have reporters at the estate within hours." "Do it. Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back." Caroline thought about Derek's cold eyes as he told her to get out of the car, about the recordings of Marguerite discussing her murder, about the man with the gun who had threatened her daughter. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The story broke at 11 o'clock that night. Every major network ran it simultaneously. Every news website crashed under the traffic. Every social media platform exploded with reactions, shares, reposts, commentary. The headline was everywhere. "Mitchell Dynasty Exposed. Recordings reveal murder plots, cover-ups, and decades of criminal conspiracy." Carolyn sat in Jonathan's library and watched the world learn the truth about the family that had tried to destroy her. The recordings played in damning sequence. Derek discussing with his father how to handle Carolyn. Marguerite suggesting an accident. Edward directing payments to mysterious offshore accounts. Family lawyers strategizing about witness intimidation and evidence suppression. Experts appeared on screen to analyze the implications. Legal analysts explained the criminal charges that could result. Business commentators predicted the collapse of Mitchell Holdings. Social commentators discussed the pattern of abuse and manipulation that ran through everything the family did. And through it all, Caroline's story, told in her own words in a pre-recorded interview that Rachel had helped arrange. The night in the blizzard, the walk through the snow, the doorstep where she had nearly died, the birth of her daughter, the custody battle, the threats, the attack on the road. She told it all, every detail, every emotion, every moment of terror and determination and rage. And America listened. By midnight, #Justice for Caroline was trending globally. By morning, protesters had gathered outside Mitchell Holdings' headquarters. By noon the next day, every major business partner had suspended their relationship with the Mitchell family, and the company's stock had dropped 40%. Edward Mitchell released a statement denying everything. It was dismissed as obvious lies within minutes. Marguerite Mitchell was taken into custody for questioning. Her lawyers tried to prevent it. They failed. And Derek Mitchell, awaiting trial in a holding facility, was placed on suicide watch after allegedly threatening to harm himself rather than face what was coming. But Caroline wasn't finished yet. The night before the trial, Caroline couldn't sleep. She paced the halls of the estate, Grace sleeping peacefully in the nursery, the house silent except for the creak of old floorboards and the distant ticking of antique clocks. Tomorrow she would face Derek for the first time since that night on the highway. Tomorrow she would tell her story to strangers and pray they believed her. Jonathan found her in the library at 3 a.m., sitting in the darkness, staring at the dying embers of the fire. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked softly. "Every time I close my eyes, I see his face, the way he looked at me when he told me to get out. Like I was nothing, like I had never been here anything." Carolyn wrapped her arms around herself. "What if the jury doesn't believe me? What if all that evidence isn't enough? What if he walks free and comes after Grace?" Jonathan sat down beside her, took her cold hands in his warm ones. "Do you remember what you said to me after I told you about the investigation into Elizabeth's death? About how trust has to be tested to prove its worth? Yes. This is the same thing. Tomorrow the truth gets tested. Your story against his lies. Your evidence against his money. Your courage against his arrogance." He squeezed her hands. "And the truth will win, because you're not the same woman who got out of that car. You're not the woman who believed his lies for 6 years. You're someone new, someone stronger, someone who's already survived everything he could throw at you." "I don't feel strong, I feel terrified." "Those aren't mutually exclusive." Jonathan smiled gently. "The bravest people I've ever known were always terrified. They just refused to let fear stop them from doing what needed to be done." Carolyn leaned her head against his shoulder, drew strength from his presence, his steadiness, his belief in her. "Will you be there tomorrow in the courtroom? Every second, every moment. I'll be right behind you the whole time." "Promise, William?" "I promise." They sat together in the darkness until dawn began to lighten the windows. Then Caroline rose, squared her shoulders, and went to prepare for the battle of her life. The trial began on a gray February morning with snow threatening on the horizon. Caroline took the witness stand at 10:15 a.m. She wore a simple dark dress and minimal makeup. Grace was at home with Margaret and a security team that Jonathan had hired to ensure her safety. Helena Cross led her through the events of Christmas Eve. The drive, the stop on the highway, Derek's words, the cold, the walk through the blizzard. Carolyn told the story without embellishment. Let the facts speak for themselves. Let the jury see the truth in her steady voice and her unwavering gaze. "And what happened when you reached the Ashford estate?" Helena asked. "I collapsed on the doorstep. I don't remember much after that. Jonathan Ashford found me and brought me inside. Dr. Brennan came as soon as she could. They saved my life." "And your baby?" "Grace was born 2 days later, premature but healthy. A miracle," the doctor said. "Objection!" Derek's lawyer was on his feet. "Characterizing the birth as a miracle is overruled." The judge's voice was sharp. "Given the circumstances, I think miracle is a reasonable description." Helena continued. "Mrs. Mitchell, in the months since your rescue, have you been the target of any threats or intimidation?" "Yes." Carolyn looked directly at the jury. "Derek's family filed a false custody claim, trying to take my daughter using manufactured evidence and paid expert witnesses. When that failed, they sent a man to run me off the road and threaten me at gunpoint. He said they would hurt my daughter if I didn't give them the recordings that exposed their crimes." "Objection. This is unsubstantiated. It's entirely substantiated." Helena held up a folder. "We have police reports, witness statements, and surveillance footage from a gas station near the crash site showing the vehicle that attacked Mrs. Mitchell. The driver has been identified as a known associate of the Mitchell family's security firm." The defense lawyer sat down slowly, his face pale. "Mrs. Mitchell," Helena continued, "why did you decide to release those recordings publicly rather than simply turning them over to law enforcement?" Carolyn took a breath. This was the question she had been waiting for. "Because I was afraid," she said simply. "The Mitchell family has connections everywhere. Money everywhere. Influence everywhere. I had already seen them manufacture evidence and buy expert testimony. I had seen them threaten me and my daughter. I had seen them discuss my murder like it was a business expense." She looked at the jury, at each face in turn. "I released those recordings because I wanted the world to see the truth before anyone could bury it. I wanted millions of witnesses who couldn't be intimidated or bought or silenced." Her voice strengthened. "And I wanted Derek and his family to understand something. That I am not afraid of them anymore. That they can't silence me. that the truth is more powerful than all their money and influence combined. The courtroom was silent. Even the defense lawyers had nothing to say. Helena nodded and returned to her seat. No further questions. Derek's lead attorney rose slowly for cross-examination. He looked like a man who knew he was fighting a losing battle but was contractually obligated to continue. Mrs. Mitchell, isn't it true that you had a difficult relationship with your husband? Our relationship was difficult because he was abusing me. Carolyn's voice was calm. He isolated me from friends and family. He controlled our finances. He sabotaged my fertility treatments while letting me believe I was the reason we couldn't conceive. And when I was no longer useful to him, he tried to kill me. That's your interpretation of events. No, that's the truth. Carolyn held his gaze without flinching. Your client is sitting in this courtroom right now because the evidence is overwhelming. GPS data, phone records, bank transfers, recorded conversations. You can spin whatever narrative you want, counselor. But the facts don't change. Derek Mitchell tried to murder me, and he would have succeeded if I hadn't found Jonathan Ashford's doorstep. The defense attorney tried several more approaches. He questioned her mental state. He implied she had fabricated evidence. He suggested the recordings had been manipulated. Carolyn shot down every attack with the steady confidence of a woman who had faced death and won. Finally, the attorney gave up. No further questions. Carolyn stepped down from the witness stand. She walked past Derek without looking at him, past his parents sitting rigid and pale in the gallery, past the cameras and reporters and the whole watching world. She walked out of the courtroom with her head held high, and she didn't look back. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Caroline was at the estate when Rachel called with the news. She was in the nursery, rocking Grace to sleep, when her phone buzzed with the message that would change everything. Guilty on all counts, Rachel said, her voice cracking with emotion. Attempted murder in the first degree. Reckless endangerment, financial fraud, conspiracy to commit murder. All of it. Carolyn closed her eyes. Let the words wash over her. Guilty. After everything, after all the lies and manipulation and terror, the truth had finally prevailed. What about his parents? Separate trials coming up, but the prosecutor is confident. Edward's looking at RICO charges and conspiracy. Marguerite's facing conspiracy to commit murder based on those recordings. The whole family is going down, Carolyn. Every single one of them. And Derek? What's his sentence? Sentencing is in 3 weeks, but the prosecutors are pushing for 30 to life. Given the evidence of premeditation and the ongoing conspiracy, Rachel paused. He's never getting out. He'll die in prison. Caroline looked down at Grace, sleeping peacefully in her arms. So small, so perfect, so completely unaware of the storm that had raged around her since before she was born. It's over, Caroline whispered. Yeah. Rachel's voice softened. It's really over. You did it, Caroline. You beat them. After she hung up, Caroline sat in the nursery for a long time, watching her daughter breathe, listening to the wind outside, feeling something she had almost forgotten existed. Peace. Jonathan found her there an hour later. He stood in the doorway, not wanting to disturb the moment, but she looked up and smiled and beckoned him in. I heard, he said quietly. The news is everywhere. I know. How do you feel? Caroline considered the question. How did she feel? After everything that had happened, after walking through hell not once but multiple times? I feel light, she said finally. Like I've been carrying a weight for 6 years and I didn't even know it until it was gone. Jonathan sat down beside her, looked at Grace with the tender expression he had worn since the first moment he saw her. What now? He asked. Now I rebuild. Carolyn leaned against his shoulder, drawing strength from his presence. I get my nursing license reinstated. I find a place to live. I raise my daughter. I become the person I was supposed to be before Derek Mitchell convinced me to be someone else. You could stay here, Jonathan said carefully. The estate is huge. There's plenty of room. And Grace has everything she needs. Jonathan, Carolyn smiled and touched his face gently. Are you asking me to move in with you? He looked down, suddenly uncertain, vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. I'm asking you not to leave. Not yet. His voice was rough with emotion. These past months, watching you fight, watching you survive, watching you become this incredible force of nature. It's changed something in me. Elizabeth would have loved you. I know that sounds strange, but I think about it all the time. She would have seen what I see, someone remarkable, someone worth fighting for. Jonathan, I'm not saying we have to rush into anything. I know you've been through trauma. I know you need time to heal, but I want you to know that whatever you need, whatever happens, I'm here. This house is here. We're your family now, if you'll have us. Carolyn felt tears pricking at her eyes, not from sadness, from something far more complicated. Gratitude. Hope. The first stirrings of something she had thought she would never feel again. I'm not ready for romance, she said honestly. Not yet. I don't know if I'll ever be ready to trust someone that way again. I understand. But I'm not ready to leave either. She looked around the nursery, at the life she had built in this beautiful house with these extraordinary people. This feels like home. You feel like home, and maybe that's enough for now. Maybe we don't need to define it or rush it or make it into something specific. Maybe we just see where things go. Jonathan smiled. The first real smile she had seen from him since the night they met. I can live with that. Good. Carolyn leaned up and kissed his cheek softly. Now go tell Margaret the news. She's been stress baking since the verdict came in. There are probably 6 cakes in the kitchen by now. Jonathan laughed and stood up. At the door he paused. Elizabeth would have approved of you, he said. I'm certain of it. I wish I could have met her. In some ways, I think you did. He looked at the nursery, at the baby sleeping in Carolyn's arms, at the woman who had walked through a blizzard and emerged stronger than anyone could have imagined. I think she's been here all along, watching over this house, making sure it found its way back to being a home again. He left. Carolyn sat in the golden evening light with her daughter and let herself believe, for the first time in years, that everything was going to be okay. 3 months after Derek's conviction, Vanessa Cole gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Oliver. She had considered naming him something completely different, something that had no connection to the Mitchell family at all. But in the end, she chose a name that meant peace, because that was what she wanted for her son. A life free from the darkness and manipulation that had defined his father's existence. Caroline visited her in the gas cottage the day after the birth, bringing flowers in a casserole and the complicated emotions that came with facing the woman who had once been her rival. He's beautiful, Carolyn said, looking down at the sleeping infant. He has your nose. And Derek's eyes. Vanessa's voice was sad. I hope that's all he inherited. Children aren't their parents. Grace isn't Derek, no matter whose DNA she carries. And Oliver won't be either. Not if you raise him right. Vanessa looked up at Caroline with something like wonder. How are you so generous? After everything I did to you? Because I understand now that you were a victim too. Not the same one I was, but still a victim. Derek manipulated both of us, made us both believe lies. The only difference is that I woke up in a blizzard and you woke up in a courtroom. I should have seen it sooner. Maybe, but you saw it eventually. You gave me the evidence that destroyed them. You testified at Marguerite's trial last month. You helped make sure that family can never hurt anyone again. Carolyn smiled gently. That takes courage, Vanessa. Real courage. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like the least I could do. Then we'll call it a start. They sat together in silence for a while, 2 mothers with babies born of the same man, but destined for very different futures. The sun streamed through the cottage windows. A fire crackled in the hearth. Outside, spring was finally beginning to thaw the frozen ground. I'm leaving Vermont next week, Vanessa said eventually. My sister has a place in Oregon. She's offered to let me stay while I figure out what comes next. That sounds like a good plan. Will you, Vanessa hesitated, will you tell Grace about Oliver someday? They're half-siblings. Maybe when they're older they could know each other. Caroline considered the question carefully. 2 children, both innocent of their father's sins, both deserving of every chance at happiness. When they're old enough to understand, she said finally, when they can make their own choices about what kind of relationship they want. Yes, I'll tell Grace she has a brother. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. For everything, for the recordings, for the trial, for, she gestured at the cottage around them, for giving me a safe place when I had nowhere else to go. That's what family does. But I'm not family. I was the enemy. You were never the enemy, Vanessa. You were another person Derek used and discarded. Carolyn reached out and squeezed her hand. Maybe we're not friends. Maybe we never will be. But we're connected now, through our children, through our survival. That has to count for something. Vanessa nodded, unable to speak. Caroline stood to leave. At the door, she turned back. Take care of yourself, Vanessa, and take care of Oliver. Give him the childhood neither of us got to give to our babies originally. Fill it with love and safety and all the things Derek tried to destroy. I will. I promise. Carolyn walked back to the main house through the spring sunshine. Daffodils were beginning to push through the soil. Birds were returning from wherever they had spent the winter. The world was waking up again after months of cold and darkness. She found Jonathan in the library, working on something at his computer. He looked up when she entered and smiled that smile that had become familiar over the past months. Warm, genuine, full of a quiet joy that seemed to grow stronger every day. How is she? She's good, scared about the future, but good. Carolyn sat down across from him. She's leaving next week, starting over somewhere far away from all of this. That's probably wise. I think so too. Caroline was quiet for a moment. She asked me to tell Grace about Oliver someday, when they're old enough. And what did you say? I said yes. She met his eyes. Those children didn't choose their father. They shouldn't be punished for his sins. Jonathan nodded slowly. Elizabeth would have said the same thing. You keep comparing me to her. Only the good parts, he smiled. You're different people. She was all light and laughter and boundless optimism. You're something else, forged in fire, tempered by pain, strong in ways she never had to be. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. And yes, it's also a compliment. Jonathan stood and crossed to where she sat. He knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. I loved Elizabeth with everything I had. When she died, I thought that part of me died with her. I thought I would spend the rest of my life in this house, waiting to see her again. And now? Now I find myself hoping she was right about what comes after. Not because I'm eager to leave this life, but because I want her to see what's happening here. His eyes were bright with emotion. I want her to see that I didn't give up, that I found a reason to keep living, that her house became a home again. Jonathan, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I know you need time. I know trust doesn't come easily after what you've been through. But I need you to know how I feel. I need you to understand that when I look at you, I don't see a broken woman who needs saving. I see someone extraordinary who saved herself. And I'm grateful every single day that she ended up on my doorstep. Carolyn felt tears running down her cheeks, tears of worry and fear and hope all tangled together into something she couldn't name. I'm scared, she whispered, scared of trusting again, scared of being wrong again, scared of losing everything again. I know, but I'm also, she took a shaky breath, I'm also tired of being scared. I'm tired of letting Derek's ghost control my life. I want to move forward, Jonathan. I want to try. I just don't know how. Then we'll figure it out together. Jonathan squeezed her hands gently. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who found each other in a storm and decided to keep walking in the same direction. Caroline laughed despite her tears. That's very poetic. I've been practicing. He grinned. Thomas suggested I should be more romantic if I wanted to win you over. He has very strong opinions about the subject. Thomas thinks we should be together. Thomas has thought we should be together since approximately 3 days after you arrived. He's been dropping increasingly unsubtle hints for months. I believe his exact words last week were, Dad, just tell her already. This is painful to watch. Carolyn laughed harder. The kind of laughter that releases tension and fear and everything else that's been building up for too long. Well, she said when she could breathe again, I suppose we shouldn't disappoint Thomas. Definitely not. He'd never let me hear the end of it. She leaned forward and kissed him, softly at first, hesitant, then with more certainty as he responded in kind. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling like teenagers. So what happens now? Jonathan asked. Now we do exactly what you said. We figure it out together. Carolyn stood and pulled him to his feet. But first, I believe Margaret mentioned something about dinner being ready. And I'm starving. Always practical. Someone has to be. They walked toward the dining room hand in hand. Behind them, through the library windows, the spring sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold. The gardens were coming back to life. The house was full of light and warmth, and the sound of Grace babbling in her crib over the baby monitor. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Life rarely provided those. But it was a beginning, a real one, built on truth and trust and the hard-won wisdom that comes from surviving the unsurvivable. And for Caroline Mitchell, that was more than enough. The garden party was Jonathan's idea. 1 year to the day since Caroline had stumbled out of a blizzard and collapsed on his doorstep. 1 year since everything changed for both of them. It seemed like a moment worth celebrating. The estate's gardens had never looked more beautiful. Spring flowers bloomed in carefully planned explosions of color. Tables set with white linen dotted the emerald lawn. String lights hung from ancient oak trees, waiting to twinkle when the evening sun finally set. Carolyn stood at the edge of the celebration, watching the guests mingle. Rachel was there, of course, deep in conversation with Helena Cross about some legal matter that would probably benefit other women in situations like Caroline's. Dr. Brennan sat in a comfortable chair, regaling a group of listeners with stories from her decades of rural medicine. Thomas had brought friends from college, young people full of energy and hope, and the particular joy that came from knowing the world was theirs for the taking. Grace toddled across the lawn toward her mother, chubby legs still uncertain, but determination unwavering. At 14 months old, she was walking, talking in simple words, and displaying a stubborn streak that Caroline recognized all too well. "Mama," Grace announced, wrapping her arms around Caroline's legs. "Cake?" "Soon, baby. We have to wait for everyone." "Cake now." Carolyn laughed and scooped her daughter into her arms. "You are definitely my child." "She's definitely someone's child." Jonathan appeared beside them, carrying 2 glasses of champagne. "That level of stubbornness has to be genetic." "Are you saying I'm stubborn?" "I'm saying you're persistent. It's one of your many excellent qualities." He kissed her cheek and offered her a glass. "To 1 year." "To 1 year." Caroline clinked her glass against his. "And many more." They had been together, officially, publicly together, for 6 months now. Moving slowly, carefully, building something real on the foundation of crisis and survival. It wasn't always easy. Trust was still a fragile thing for Caroline, easily bruised by old wounds and older fears. But they were making it work, day by day, conversation by conversation. Small acts of love and patience accumulating into something larger than either of them could have built alone. Margaret appeared at Caroline's elbow, beaming with satisfaction at the party she had largely organized. "The caterers are ready," she announced, "and I do believe it's time for your speech." "My speech?" Carolyn blanched. "I didn't prepare a speech." "You don't need to prepare. Just speak from the heart." Margaret took Grace from her arms. "I'll keep this little monster entertained. You go say what needs to be said." Before Caroline could protest, she found herself being gently pushed toward the small platform that had been set up at the garden center. Guests began to gather around, faces expectant, conversations fading into anticipatory silence. Carolyn looked out at the crowd, at the people who had become her family over the past year, at the life she had built from the ashes of the one Derek had tried to destroy. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "1 year ago tonight, I was dying." The words fell into perfect stillness. No one moved, no one breathed. I was lying on a doorstep in a blizzard, my body giving up, my baby in danger. I had been abandoned by the person who was supposed to love me most. I had lost everything, my home, my money, my faith in humanity itself. She paused, gathering strength for what came next. And then a door opened. A stranger carried me inside. A family I had never met poured everything they had into saving my life. And when my daughter was born 2 days later, She entered a world full of people who had chosen to care about her before she even existed. Caroline's voice grew stronger. I've learned a lot this year. I've learned that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. I've learned that survival isn't about strength. It's about stubbornness. And I've learned that the darkest moments of our lives can become the foundations for something beautiful, if we're willing to let them. She looked at Jonathan, standing at the edge of the crowd with tears in his eyes. I've also learned that love doesn't come with guarantees. It doesn't come with certainty. It comes with risk and fear and the constant possibility of pain. But it also comes with moments like this one, surrounded by people who chose us, holding futures we never expected, living lives that seemed impossible just 12 months ago. She raised her glass. So here's to doorsteps, to strangers who become family, to children who teach us what matters, and to all of you who helped me walk out of the darkest winter into the brightest spring I've ever known. Hear, hear! The toast echoed across the garden, glasses raised, cheers overlapping. Caroline stepped down from the platform and walked directly to Jonathan. She wrapped her arms around him and held on tight. That was beautiful, he murmured against her hair. It was true. Everything I said was true. I know. He pulled back to look at her face. I have something for you. I was going to wait until later, but he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Caroline's breath caught. Before you say anything, Jonathan said quickly, this isn't what you think. Not exactly. He opened the box to reveal a simple ring, not an engagement ring, but something older, more personal. A thin gold band with a small emerald set between two diamonds. This was Elizabeth's grandmother's ring, Jonathan explained. Elizabeth wore it every day of our marriage. After she died, I kept it in a drawer because I couldn't bear to look at it. He took Caroline's hand gently. I'm not asking you to marry me. I know you're not ready for that, and that's okay. But I'm asking you to wear this, to carry a piece of Elizabeth with you, to be part of this family's history, wherever that history takes us. Carolyn stared at the ring, at this symbol of a love that had ended and a love that was just beginning, at the connection between a woman who had died and a woman who had almost died, and the man who had loved them both. Are you sure? She whispered. This is so precious. What if Thomas chose it? He said Elizabeth would have wanted you to have it. Jonathan smiled. He also said if I mess this up, he would disown me and adopt you instead. Caroline laughed through the tears that were streaming down her face. Then yes, I'll wear it. Jonathan slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. I love you, Caroline said. The words came easily now, after months of practice. I love you, Jonathan Ashford. I love your son and your housekeeper and your country doctor and your ridiculous, beautiful house. I love everything about this life we're building together. I love you too. Jonathan kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I love you in ways I didn't think I'd ever love again. And I'm grateful for you every single day. They stood together in the garden, surrounded by friends and family, in the golden light of a perfect spring evening. Grace's laughter rang out somewhere nearby, chased by Thomas's deeper voice playing some silly game with his baby sister. And Carolyn Mitchell, who had walked through a blizzard, survived a birth without a hospital, faced down a family of murderers, and rebuilt her entire life from nothing, finally allowed herself to believe that she was home, really truly home.